I'm Vinnie Politan. The subject of my investigation is the tragic murder of Keith Caneiro and his entire family, wiped out before their sprawling mansion was set on fire. And prosecutors say it was his own brother who did it. Here's the story. In the early morning darkness of November 20th, 2018, a wealthy New Jersey mansion stood quietly in horse country, Colts Neck, until it erupted in flames and horror. Inside were the charred bodies of Keith Caneiro, his wife Jennifer, and their 2 young children, found dead after the fire consumed their home. Authorities say Keith was shot outside the house, his wife shot and stabbed, and their children brutally stabbed, all before any flames touched wood. Prosecutors say hours earlier, his brother, Paul Caneiro, allegedly set fire to his own home in a nearby town. A rushed blaze, prosecutors argue, was a ruse to mask the real atrocity. Today, Caneiro sits jailed, facing first-degree murder, aggravated arson, and weapons charges, while a peaceful community struggles to grasp how greed and betrayal allegedly extinguished a whole family. This is another one of those cases and that we're looking at here where the allegation is that the killer tried to set it up to make it look like someone else committed the crime. And in this case, they're saying one brother took out another brother and his entire family, set fire to his mansion, but also set fire to his own house on the same day to kind of throw everybody off. Let's bring in Court TV field reporter Cody Thomas. Cody, all this is happening in like one day, but there's a lot of moving parts here. Do we know the prosecution's timeline?
Yeah, Vinny, quite a crazy story. Not even one day, one couple of hours in the early mornings back in November of 2018. Now, the prosecution believes they have nailed down Paul Caneiro's steps leading up to this brutal attack, the brutal 4 murders of his own family members, no less, Vinny. So it all starts on November 20th, 2018. At or before 4 a.m. when the tension eventually boiled over. Now, Paul Caneiro allegedly shows up at the house of his brother Keith. We don't know what the two may have said to each other, but prosecutors say Paul shoots and kills Keith outside the home. He then goes inside, and that's when they say things turn into a rampage. Paul allegedly shoots and stabs Keith's wife, Jennifer, killing her too. Now, he then allegedly turned his attention to his niece and nephew, Keith and Jennifer's kids, just 11 and 8 years old, Vinny. Prosecutors say Paul stabbed them to death. Take a listen to this.
We allege that the defendant repeatedly shot and killed his brother while he was outside of the side of his home, and then moved to murder the rest of the family inside the home. We allege that Jennifer was shot and stabbed, and the 2 Caneiro children were repeatedly stabbed by knife.
And Vinny, prosecutors also believe that Paul then goes into the basement of that home to start a fire. The one that would end up engulfing the family's home, of course. It was allegedly an attempt to conceal evidence and throw off the investigators. Now, about an hour later, around 5 a.m., Paul gets back to his house in Ocean Township. Now, that's about a 20-minute drive at that time of day. Now, investigators say there they found evidence of the murders. Then Paul does the unthinkable here, Vinny. With his wife and 2 daughters inside, he sets fire to his own home. And prosecutors say his goal was to make it look like there was some kind of targeted hit out on the entire Caneiro family. The firefighters knocked that fire down quickly. In about 20 minutes, they were already starting to put it out. But over at Keith's house, as he and his family lay there dead, it wasn't until more than 7 hours afterwards, in the afternoon, that fire crews responded. The alleged cover-up plan, of course, did not work, and just a few days later, Paul Caneiro is arrested and charged, and he's still behind bars today. So again, just to recap, Vinny, this is the prosecution's timeline for that day. At 4 a.m., Paul Caneiro goes to his brother Keith's house, kills his brother and his brother's family, sets fire to his brother's house. About an hour later, at 5 a.m., he goes back to his own house, sets fire to his own home. And firefighters don't arrive at Keith Caneiro's house until the afternoon. And Vinny, we know according to an affidavit that Keith Caneiro was shot once in the back and 4 times in the head. And again, Vinny, that 11 and 8-year-old niece and nephew stabbed to death. This is nightmare material here.
Absolutely. And, young, those kids are young, and it's, the allegation is that it's Uncle Paul who's doing all this to them. Thanks so much. Cody's going to stick around the entire program. This brings us to the first question in our investigation, and it's really, about the prosecution and their case. Does the prosecution's timeline make sense? It's got to make sense if you want to convince a jury beyond a reasonable doubt that one brother took out his brother and his brother's family. Joining me, creator and host of Grizzly True Crime YouTube channel, Gisela K is with us, and New Jersey criminal defense attorney, former prosecutor Al Wunsch III. Great to see you both tonight. Gisela, let me begin with you. Looking at the timeline, does it make sense? Are there holes in it? Is it something that a jury could understand and could believe here?
I must say it depends how the state lays it out. Because when I first heard about the case and you just look at the overview, it sounds crazy. Like, what is really going on here? And then there's two fires. And I think that the defendant likely did a lot to try to throw people off. But when you deep dive the documents and you actually look at the state's evidence, I mean, they've got it down almost to the minute. So I think in that way, it's a very logical timeline. It's feasible, and everything is accounted for, from what witnesses heard, from what neighbors' cameras caught, like his car leaving, his car coming back to his house, which was between 2 and 4 in the morning. And then the fire starting at the other house and at his house. So I think when you really look at it, and as long as they lay it out like that with everything they've got, I think it's going to make total sense.
Al, you're in Jersey. You know the lay of the land. You know these towns and what it's like. Does this timeline, will it make sense to a Jersey jury?
I think it will. I mean, fratricide in and of itself is so rare. It's the most uncommon form of homicide, and it really has got a biblical sense to it. And I think that if you take a look at where the prosecution is going with this, they're setting it up almost with that biblical Genesis 4, where you've got one brother so jealous of the other brother who's so much more successful, who everyone looks up to. And then he is the black sheep of the family, and yet he's the oldest. And yet he's not at the same level. And he's taking grief for that. The timeline fits perfectly, and the facts fit perfectly for what came to pass in this instance. Because everything makes sense from the standpoint of he's trying to make this look like a crime of some mob guys coming in from Jersey or New York and taking him out. Try to make it look like an execution. But, when the two children are stabbed as viciously and as horribly as they are, I think they're going to have a real hard time selling that story. So I think the timeline works. I think the facts fit perfectly. And I think that the Jersey jury is going to be in and out pretty quick on this one.
Gisela, when you think about it, we're looking at the defendant right now. This had to be planned out, right? This is not a spontaneous type of alleged crime. If in fact he did it, it took some time to plan it out, but I'm thinking about actually carrying it out. Things had to be almost like in a manic state if you're going around shooting your brother, shooting and stabbing your sister-in-law, then running in, stabbing the kids, then setting this enormous mansion on fire. Then you got to jump back in the car. You got to scoot back across to another town down there in South Jersey. And then you've got to figure out a way to set your own house on fire, but without killing anybody.
Exactly. I think he watched a few too many movies. The thing that really gets him with all these things that he was, apparently coming up with, if he's going to go in the house, and even the way that he killed the victims in the house versus his own brother, which one would say the rage is towards his brother. He shot his brother outside the house and then stabbed and shot the others, even stabbing the kids. I mean, that's next level. But to think of his calculated actions of turning off his own DVR system at his garage, and then waiting half an hour. Then he gets in his car and he drives 20 minutes to his brother's house. If you look at the timeline, he would have been sitting outside his brother's house, probably festering a little bit. Then knocking on the door and getting the brother to come outside. Then neighbors hear the shots. I mean, there's so much there. And then to go in, I think he went in doing everything he did with that rage, as you say, in quite a state, but to throw people off, thinking I, as the brother, would never do that. I wouldn't shoot my brother and go in and stab his kids, my niece and nephew, and his wife. Why would I do that? But like, all the evidence points at him. Everything that he did points at him.
Yeah, Al, and you wonder, you know, it's difficult to get inside of a criminal mind, right? And what they're doing, but this is, again, one of those where it's not spur of the moment. It's not that crime of passion that we often see, a moment of rage. This is something that he had to calculate it out in some way. And I think you're right? He's trying to make it look like, you know, the mob's in on it. And that it's some level of a professional hit or someone trying to send a message. And it seems like the message would be to him because he's the one who's not dead and his brother and his family is dead. I made him speechless. Gisela, I've been waiting years to do this, to ask a question and have Al speechless, and I finally was able to do it. Gisela, I'll give you that one, that question. It really does seem, right, that he's trying to make it look like that it was this professional job and he was the one that was getting the message. But it would seem it would go the other way around because his brother was the one that had all the money. So if money was owed to someone for their business, if I'm a mobster, I'd take out Paulie because Keith is the one who could still get the money.
Exactly. Keith is the one with majority of the money, and that's, of course, the main issue. So wait till the jury hears, oh my word, Keith sent an email the day before, like the evening before this all happened, and threatening to then cut off the money for this surviving brother. You know, I think he thought, ooh, I'm going to kill the whole family, get all the life insurance, take over the businesses, and, you know, no one will ask any questions. They'll feel sorry for me. But that is definitely not what has happened here.
Didn't work out that way. Not at all. All right. Gisela is sticking around. We're going to reconnect with Al. We've got a lot more to get to. Coming up next, is this a strong prosecution case? Did an affair lead to double murder?
The Commonwealth's Attorney's Office has secured an indictment against Brendan Banfield for the murder of his wife, Christine, and the murder of Mr. Ryan.
Prosecutors allege the defendant planned to run away with the family's au pair. So he killed his wife and another man.
He was there, I'm gonna kill her, I'm gonna kill her.
It's a case of sex, lies, and deadly deception.
The Au Pair Affair murder trial. Live coverage next week following jury selection on Court TV.
This one is the most brutal case that I've seen in my experience here. And I know that the entire team of investigators and people involved in working on this case, the fire officials, that they've struggled with this too.
And there's a lot of reasons for struggling with something like this, is what you came across in that mansion that burned for hours and hours and hours before, you know, there was a response to it because people didn't know it was on fire. It's a little bit isolated and the fire started from the inside. Because inside were the charred remains of those two children, their mom and their dad. All gone. Let's bring back in Court TV field reporter Cody Thomas. Okay, we went through the timeline, right? Timeline's great, but you need evidence to back it up. What has been made public through 8 years of pre-trial litigation and motions in this case? What evidence do prosecutors have here?
Oh, yeah, Vinny, 8 years of all this legal battle going on, and part of the reason for that are these two pieces of big evidence. Shocker, DNA evidence and also video evidence, but video evidence specifically from a home surveillance system in Paul Caneiro's house. And there was a big issue over both of these pieces of, you know, controversial evidence here in this case. So we'll start with the DNA. DNA analysts say that they found a mixture of Paul's DNA and his deceased niece's DNA. It was found on gloves and a pair of jeans in the basement of Paul's home. Now, this was based on the findings of this newer DNA technology called STR Mix, which prosecutors say this technology has been used and tested repeatedly and is generally accepted in the scientific community due to its consistent results. Now, why is this controversial? the defense says the technology has not been adequately tested and it's not reliable. And the point they made with all this is that the technology isn't equipped to differentiate samples of people who are related, bringing it back to the mixture of Paul and his niece's DNA being found together. But ultimately, Vinnie, the judge ruled this DNA evidence from this technology can be used at trial. Now, on to the video evidence from the video surveillance system in Paul's house. Police took Paul Caneiro's home surveillance system without getting a warrant. They chose not to delay trying to get a proper warrant because his house was literally on fire when they were there, when they arrived. Now, the defense obviously opposed admitting whatever footage is on the DVR system into evidence given the lack of warrant. But why is this important? Prosecutors allege the surveillance system shows Paul Caneiro walking up to the camera in his garage at 1:29 a.m. that night and shutting it off in an effort to mask his departure from his house, to drive to his brother's house to commit the murders before coming back to set fire to his own house, which Vinnie supports the prosecution's timeline. And the judge also ruled that evidence from that video surveillance system can also be used during trial. So we got the DNA evidence, we got the video surveillance evidence, two big pieces of evidence that could possibly put Paul Caneiro away forever.
Yeah, like, I guess it's ironic. Is it ironic? Is that the word I'm looking for? That you don't want any surveillance video of you committing this crime in your own house, setting it on fire, etc. So you go to turn off your camera, but your camera's recording you turning off the camera, and then that becomes the evidence. Wow. Brings us to the next question in our investigation. Is this a strong prosecution case? Not every prosecution case is strong. Sometimes when cases get older, they're not as strong as they were years ago. Let's bring in our experts. Joining me, private investigator Lauren Vellucci, and back with us, hopefully, fingers crossed, New Jersey attorney Al Wunsch III. All right, he's unfrozen New Jersey lawyer. Al Wunsch is back with us. Okay. Lauren, I want your take on this. What are your thoughts? Let's start with the video of him turning off his video camera.
It is apropos, and I think that no wonder they, fought so hard for so long to try to keep this out, because this is going to be one of the pieces of evidence that I think is going to be the nail in his coffin. It's pretty damning. This case, to answer the question that you're asking, with the prosecution being strong, it absolutely is. There's means, motive, and opportunity, and then you have things on top of that like DNA. So I think that they're going to do just fine.
Al, New Jersey has a little bit of a reputation, especially here at Court TV, that cases seem to take a lot longer to get to trial than other states around the nation. But 8 years is absurd. Do you think that's part of the defense strategy, hoping that the case gets weaker with age rather than better?
Well, traditionally, that is the way. I mean, the whole concept of a speedy trial is wonderful, but from a defense standpoint, you want to drag things out as long as humanly possible, because evidence disappears, witnesses die, witnesses change their testimony, witnesses get disappeared, they're not around anymore, you can't find them. And so it does help the defense traditionally. This case, it took a lot of time, predominantly because of COVID, and then a ton of motions, and then even the very rare instance of taking an appeal up to the Supreme Court of New Jersey with regards to an evidence question. So there are issues in here that are so unique to this trial, which you don't see very often. But time is always on the side of the defendant. There's no doubt about that.
Now, Lauren, let's talk about the DNA. The DNA of his niece. And yeah, there was, a battle about whether or not you can rely upon the science. But this is why it strikes me and makes it very powerful evidence to me, is because when I hear the description of the evidence of jeans and gloves and a mixture of the DNA from him and his niece, all of a sudden I can picture him murdering this little girl. Before I heard about that evidence, especially the gloves, I didn't like that image. It was hard for me to have that image. But I hear gloves, hidden in the basement. Now all of a sudden, I can see Paul Caneiro, unbelievably, taking the life of this beautiful little girl.
You're exactly right, Vinnie, and I think that that is going to serve as such a visual aid for the jury as well. And, you know, they'll be instructed that they can't take emotion into that, but the jury is only human, and they're going to. In cases where children are brutally murdered, the jury takes that person as they should. And so this DNA evidence is new, upcoming, and it is fairly reliable. So they are going to have so many pieces of evidence for whatever member of that jury to want to latch onto, in my opinion, to convict this monster. Because if true that he did this to those children specifically, it takes a special kind of human to do that, and it's disgusting.
Al, do you think he has to testify to explain why you would turn off your surveillance camera and then coincidentally your house is then set on fire?
Well, especially if he's, you know, using the mafia did this, or the Russian mob came in, or something along those lines, then you would want to have more surveillance going on in your household as opposed to less. So that might be the situation if he's going to use that, that horsewinkle defense in this case. But I can't imagine he's taken the stand. I mean, what's really unique about this case is, you know, you don't need motive, but they've got a motive, and they've got a very strong motive. And then they have the other blood evidence, and they have everything else, and the timeline fits. I don't think him taking the stand is going to help him by any stretch of the imagination. I think the prosecution has nailed the coffin shut on this one. So, I mean, if he takes the stand, you know, more power to him, but I don't think it's going anywhere.
Al Wunsch, Lauren Vellucci, thank you both so much. We'll see you again soon. Still to come, was the brothers' relationship fuel for murder? I'm Vinnie Politan. We continue our investigation of the murders of Keith Caneiro, his wife, and his children, a family executed inside their sprawling New Jersey mansion. And the man prosecutors say was responsible, his own brother. Here's the story. It began with money, resentment, and a widening fracture between brothers Paul Caneiro and Keith Caneiro, men who once shared both blood and business. On a cold November morning in Colts Neck, New Jersey, any hope of reconciliation vanished. Keith Caneiro was found dead on his front lawn, shot before flames swallowed his sprawling mansion. Inside, tragedy deepened. Police say Jennifer Caneiro, just 45, was killed next, along with their children, 11-year-old Jesse and 8-year-old Sophia. Investigators believe they were stabbed before the mansion burned, their final moments stolen in silence. Hours earlier, prosecutors say Paul Caneiro lit his own house on fire across town in Ocean Township, a staged distraction meant to blur motive and timeline. Now Paul Caneiro faces murder and aggravated arson charges as New Jersey braces for a trial rooted in betrayal, rage, and unspeakable loss. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of testimony here about the forensics and the arson investigation and DNA, etc. Big part of the case. But really at the heart of all of this is the relationship between two brothers and what was happening here. And remember, you know, jurors sitting in that box, yeah, you're going to present evidence, but you are alleging that one brother took out his other brother and his whole family. So the jury's going to have to understand what was going on in that relationship. Let's bring in Court TV field reporter Cody Thomas. What do we know about the brothers' relationship?
Well, Vinnie, we know that it must have been strong at some point because the two went into business together. They went into business, established two successful businesses together. Of course, that was all before it unraveled. Now, Vinnie, we start. Paul Caneiro and his family, they lived in New Jersey. A family friend called them all close-knit and unassuming. Paul was a businessman. He owned a $500,000 suburban home, and he had a white Porsche convertible, a very well-to-do man. Now, Paul was 51 at the time of the killings. He's married to Susan Caneiro, and they have 2 daughters who are now in their 30s, Caitlin and Marissa Caneiro. Paul's brother Keith Caneiro was a year younger than him, and Keith and his wife Jennifer had 2 kids. These were Paul's niece and nephew, 11-year-old Jesse and 8-year-old Sophia. Now, Keith, Paul's brother, lived in the affluent horse country community of Colts Neck. Now, his wealth was a little bit on another level compared to Paul's. And this is a photo of his sprawling mansion that Paul allegedly set fire to. A video, I mean to say. The brothers started a computer business as young men in 2001. They later started a pest control company together as well. And Paul allegedly stole $90,000 from his brother, according to a lawsuit filed by a family member. Now, that lawsuit alleges Keith said Paul was, quote, not carrying his weight in their businesses and was spending too much money. And Keith was going to cut off Paul's annual salary of $225,000. Prosecutors have said the motive for the murders was money-related, but they have not elaborated. Now, another possible factor was Keith's life insurance policy. It was around $3 million, and Paul would potentially have gotten it if Keith's entire family was dead. Now, for whatever the reason, it was enough to allegedly lead this suburban middle-aged businessman to kill 4 family members. But Vinnie, back to those businesses. Now, the ownership in those businesses was not equal. And this is reporting from the Associated Press. They say, quote, Keith Caneiro was 90% owner of Square One, Inc., a technology firm with his brother owning the remaining 10%. The brothers were equal owners of a second business, EcoStar Pest Management, both of which were operated out of a single office in Asbury Park. Keith Caneiro wanted to sell one of the businesses and was frustrated with Paul and the amount of money Paul spent from their business accounts, according to the affidavit. So, Vinnie, all in all, it seems like these brothers were once strong in their relationship, but you know, as they say, money is the root of all evil, and it seems that money could be what got in between them and split these brothers apart, allegedly.
Yeah, and you can kind of follow along, right? You've got the partnership, but one's not holding his weight, maybe siphoning some money from there, and that's going to cause a problem. All right, thanks, Cody. And that brings us to the next question in our investigation. Was the brothers' relationship fuel for murder? I think this is something that prosecutors need to demonstrate to this jury. Let's bring in our guest, still with us from Grizzly True Crime on YouTube. It's Gisela K. And also joining me, podcaster Roberta Glass, host of the Roberta Glass True Crime Report. All right, Roberta, I'll start with you on this one. What are your thoughts about the nature of this relationship? And do you think it got to the level that this would be fuel for murder? Things were that bad?
Well, I would say that it was a phony relationship. Paul Caneiro must be a psychopath and not having the full range of emotions. I don't think he could attach to his brother. And when his brother was in the way of what he wanted, he slaughtered him and his wife and his niece and nephew, Sophia and Jesse. So I think it was a phony relationship. I don't think there was ever any real closeness. And when it got in the way of what he wanted, he was happy to discard of them.
That's a really fascinating take, Roberta. Gisela, you know, I'm from New Jersey, and like the Caneiros, there's just 2 of us. Me and my brother, my older brother. He's the one that's more successful than his younger brother, me. But I look at this case and I can't imagine a brother doing this to a brother. But what Roberta's describing here and what Cody described here gets me closer. What are your thoughts?
I think the brothers maybe grew up pretty close. I mean, they were only 18 months apart in age. The thing is that Paul is, ironically, the older brother. So maybe he was super jealous of his younger brother just doing so much better than him. And then I think the resentment may have started building even more inside Paul's mind when he had a car accident in 2012. So that, you know, he was on disability. So he couldn't function the way that he wanted to within the businesses. So it almost, you know, he was a little bit wounded after that, quite literally. Now, the thing is that what happened then was Keith was kind of doing him favors and sending the money, a $225,000 annual salary, to Paul's wife. So that is like being extra nice. I don't know if that's so legal, but he was like, don't worry, I'm going to take care of you. I think when then Keith decided, you know what, I'm going to cut you off. I've been nice to you and you're part of the business, but you don't even pull your weight. Now you're done. I think that is where the brotherhood really fractured. And it was about this betrayal, maybe even feeling like it from both sides over the money and the control.
Yeah, that makes sense. And Roberta, if there's a change, like if this accident, I've seen it in other people's lives where you get into an accident and whether it's a physical thing, a mental thing, or a combination, suddenly you're a different type of person. That could cause some problems here as well. And at the end of the day, we're talking about big bucks here. And I understand Keith's house was a sprawling mansion, but Paul's house was very nice too, in a very nice town, and his family was living a very nice life.
Yes, and he was also, as mentioned before, on disability, but he wasn't so disabled that he couldn't go over and murdered 4 people. His pain was not in the way of his murdering 4 people. So he was also having an affair and sending money for his mistress's expenses and her daughter's expenses. So, you know, he was doing everything that he wanted to do, and certainly sending the disability checks, sending the money to his wife would maintain his disability money. So he had it all, but also we know also that Keith wanted to sell the pest control business, of which Paul had 50-50. You know, there was never a reasonable, logical reason to murder somebody. So I don't think any of these are a good reason to murder somebody or murder 4 people, including 2 children.
Yeah, but somebody did. And he's accused of being the one. And everything that both of you are saying, you know, I think could get a jury closer to understanding. It's not an excuse. But it's, how do you get there? How do you get from 2 brothers, and they don't have any other siblings that I know of, and one's going to take them out, and then getting to that level of taking out your niece and nephew as well? That is just next level stuff here. As we think about the lifestyle that Paul Caneiro is living, I'm wondering, you know, he's siphoning out the money. Where's it all going? Well, if he's got a mistress and the mistress has got issues, that's going to cost money. Who else knows what else is going on in his life? Seems like his life was crumbling a little bit here, Gisela.
I think so, yes. And I think the motive that the state doesn't have to prove, but it will be interesting if they present it to the jury. They have plenty to show, because I think he wanted to not only conceal the thefts from everybody else that was now becoming aware of it, because there was an email sent the day before these murders happened. But I think he also wanted to benefit from the life insurance, because it wasn't just the annual salary and all that. There was also this trust fund that Keith had, and there was this $3 million life insurance. And to him, I've seen it speculated that if he took out just his brother, it would be complicated to get the life insurance because he's got surviving family members. So take out the whole family, he gets everything, the businesses, the life insurance, and everything. So he was just going to just wipe them out and run with the money. I think he was super greedy.
That too makes a ton of sense. Not that it's, again, not an explanation, but trying to convince a jury as to what's going through the mind of a psychopathic killer. Yeah, I get all the money. I get it all. And then he probably was planning on collecting the insurance for the house burning down, right? You know, you get a check there. Oh, here's another check for $8 million. Oh, great. Unbelievable. Big trial coming up here on Court TV. Gisela Kay, Grizzly True Crime. Roberta Glass, True Crime Report. Thank you both so much. We'll be speaking again. Coming up next, what is the defense going to argue to this jury?
School shooting that broke hearts around the country and broke trust with law enforcement.
Now, the officers sworn to protect those students
faces a jury.
The Uvalde School Massacre Trial. Live coverage weekday mornings on Court TV.
We'll get you ready for the au pair affair murder trial. Plus, the latest on the mysterious killing of an Ohio dentist and his wife in their home.
Opening statements with Julie Grant. Mornings at 8, 7 Central on Court TV.
That fire was effectively a ruse designed to make it appear as if the overall Caneiro family was somehow targeted.
A ruse. That's what it was, according to prosecutors. You set your own house on fire with your own family inside to throw off investigators about the fire and the quadruple murder over at your brother's mansion. All right, let's bring back in Court TV field reporter Cody Thomas. We've talked a lot about the prosecution tonight. We've talked about motive, we've talked about evidence, we've talked about timeline. What do we know about the defense?
Well, Vinny, the defense hasn't specifically said the type of argument they plan to bring once the trial begins, but we do know that Paul Caneiro still maintains total innocence even after almost 8 years of all these legal battles. And Vinny, just to recap what Paul Caneiro is charged with here. He's charged with 4 counts of murder, 2 counts of felony murder, 2 counts of aggravated arson, plus a handful of weapons charges. Now, if convicted of all of those, he faces life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus 211.5 years. Now, in this whole legal process here, before the trial has began, the only plea deal, and I say deal very loosely here, the only plea deal that was offered was for him to plead guilty to the murders in exchange for life in prison without parole, but without that extra 211.5 years tacked on. So, with this plea deal, he still assured the judge that he wanted to take this to trial. So we'll have to see how this plays out in front of a jury here real soon on Court TV.
All right. Cody Thomas, thanks for all your help tonight and all week long. All right, that brings us to the final question in our investigation this hour. What's the defense going to argue to this jury? Right? Sometimes I look at these cases and I'm like, okay, I know where they're going to go. I need some help here. Let's bring in 2 attorneys. Joining me, New Jersey trial attorney Crystal Pettiford is with us, and trial attorney Matthew Barhoma also with us. Great to have you both here. All right, Crystal, you go first. What on earth is the defense going to argue to that New Jersey jury in this case?
If I'm the defense, I'm trying to establish a great relationship between the brothers. I'm trying to establish that these businesses are over 2 decades old. And during the entire course of that time, Keith was always the breadwinner of the 2. He always had a higher stake in the more productive and financially lucrative business. What's different now? I'm going to argue that Keith always looked after his brother, even in his disability, by sending those payments to his wife so that he can still continue to live the same lifestyle that he became accustomed to. You want to bring in people from the family or from the community that are going to establish that the brothers were very close, to make it hard for the jury to see why brothers who were so loving and close, able to maintain decades worth of businesses together, suddenly turn to a murder.
Matthew, what are your thoughts here about what the defense is going to say, what type of evidence they may attempt to present, or how they approach this?
Vinny, I think the defense has to be really robust, okay? And I think that there's 3 categories that I could see them going after. First is going to be the kind of evidence, okay? So far, we've seen a lot of circumstantial evidence. We've seen very little direct evidence. And the prosecution said they don't want to talk about the quantum of evidence that they have. Well, they're going to have to be very good at attacking how circumstantial it is. They might also introduce third-party culpability, okay? You have 4 victims, right? I could see them arguing that one person couldn't possibly go after all 4 at once. And not only that, but someone else did it. It wasn't the brother. Second, I could see them going after motive, okay? Here, the prosecution's laid out this fancy motive about financial, and it has the jury making a lot of assumptions. He wanted to go after this money, and he wanted to go after that, and this business, and that business, and he wanted to go after the life insurance money, right? And so here, I think they could go after motive, and I I think my colleague here actually hit on it, right? These are business partners, right, for decades, right? So I could see them going after that. Third, I think that at some point you're going to see the defense bulk about how much exposure this case has gotten, and maybe the kind of due process that this defendant's going to get.
Interesting. Crystal, you mentioned the relationship. Do you think Paul Caneiro has to get up on that stand, look the jury in the eye, talk about the love for his brother, the love for his niece and nephew, the love for his sister-in-law, in order to convince this jury that he was not capable?
In this case, I wouldn't think it's a good idea for him to take the stand, because once he takes the stand to say he loves his brother, he loves his niece and nephew, he loves his sister-in-law, and that he's not capable of such a heinous crime, he's also going to have to explain the video surveillance. He's going to have to explain the blood, and all of those things further complicates his defense. I think he can establish the relationship, how close they were, how financially secure he was, because although he wasn't as wealthy as his brother, he certainly wasn't obviously struggling, still living in a house worth $500,000, driving the Porsche, living the nice life with his family. He can establish those same things. I mean, we don't know what his daughter's positions are, but through other family members. And he has to hone in on the fact that the one family member that is like adamant that his brother was going to cut him off also stands to gain in a civil lawsuit.
Matthew, do you think that, we look at like what's happening in the courtroom itself, right? Do you think his family needs to be there, sitting behind him day after day, week after week during the course of this trial to show that support, to send some sort of a message to the jury if they're permitted to sit in there? I don't know if they're on the witness list or not, if they're going to be sequestered out of the courtroom, but how important would that be if they were able to do that?
As a defense attorney, I would like it. You got to remember, you just got to raise some doubt, okay? You got to instill some doubt in this jury. And showing the jury that he has a family of support, this is a family man. This is someone who couldn't possibly commit these heinous crimes that he's being accused of. Look at his family here. I think that would be very helpful. Do I think it brings it home for him? No. But is it yet another stepping block? Certainly.
All right, from each of you, I just want a number. How difficult a case is this for the defense? 10 being, this is a tough one. 0 being, hey, we're going to walk him out of the courtroom. Crystal, we'll go to you first.
I think I have to say a 9.
A 9.
It's up
All
there.
right. Matthew.
Yeah, I'm right there as well. Maybe 8 or a 9. They have a pretty rigid timeline, so they really got to come after that. It looks like there's a lot there, so the defense has to be good.
Yeah, it's an uphill battle. Thank you both, Crystal Pettiford, Matthew Barhalma. Great to have you on the program. This trial will not be done in days. It will take weeks. It's a very complicated case involving 4 murders and 2 arsons. But what may shed the most light on this case is the relationship between these brothers. Prosecutors really need to paint a picture of why Paul would kill Keith and his entire family. Otherwise, the jury may have a lot of unanswered questions. I'm Vinnie Politan. We'll keep digging for answers as the investigation continues.